Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
I'm chatting today with Katrina Collier. She's an expert in talent acquisition, published author and regular speaker. We're talking about why TA needs a reboot, why it's undervalued and what we can do about it. My name's Neil Armstrong. This is The View from TribePad, where people, recruitment and purpose come together.
I've really been looking forward to this conversation. You may know her from The Robot-Proof Recruiter, a hit book in talent acquisition that came out a couple of years ago. She's also a consultant, a mentor, and a facilitator to talent acquisition professionals everywhere. She's got a brand new book, Reboot Hiring, which is coming out. I'm going to be chatting to her about that today and what is going wrong in talent acquisition, because I think we all recognize we're at an inflection point at the moment with AI, shortage of resource, and all sorts of other initiatives going on. So Katrina, welcome and thank you for talking with me.
Thanks for having me, Neil. It's subtle, isn't it?
Subtle,
It's a new book.
Very subtle.
It's bright yellow. Yes, I'm excited for this conversation. So thanks for having me.
And look, the bright yellow is there to shout out that this is different. This isn't just a boring business book. This is something really useful to hiring managers so that they understand what the hell is going on. And I mean, even the term hiring managers, right? That's something that you try to address straight away in the book.
Yeah, please call them managers and leaders. They're not hiring managers. Recruiters are experts in hiring. The managers are experts in whatever it is they do. But I thought the bright yellow might be good because you could just drop it onto their desk and they'll be like, oh, what's this bright yellow thing? And then they'll see saving time, money, and hassle and open it because it's getting them to actually read it.
Yeah.
But I wrote it specifically for them. So I'm quite excited to see its impact.
And so why was that? Why does hiring need a reboot? Why that title? Why now?
Frustration. I think it was coming for a while, but when I think about how recruiters have been, particularly talent acquisition, so in-house recruiters have been treated through the 2020s, where they were sort of fired because obviously everyone panicked in the pandemic, didn't they? And then rehired to go through that incredibly busy rehiring period of everybody, and then discarded again, like they hadn't just done an amazing job and worked their butts off. And then sort of rehired, but they've been rehired in a cost-cutting way. So we don't want to hire expensive, really amazing TA leaders potentially. I'm not saying all companies do this, but I'm seeing it too often. That therefore, train up the team, really make sure that they partner and that sort of thing. So a lot of it was frustration because the Robot-Proof Recruiter is for recruiters and it gives them a lot of the information that's in Reboot Hiring. But that's one side. And I felt like I needed to talk to the other side, to managers and leaders. And so it's really, I do spend a couple of chapters really explaining what talent acquisition is, why it matters, why it's not a cost center or an admin function, for goodness sake. They are the people hiring the people that decide the fate of your company. But somehow that's lost on, when it comes to a spreadsheet, they just rule people out. But also because I do see AI starting to creep in to the point that they're like, oh, I can get rid of my TA team.
Yeah.
Well, actually, until you learn how to articulate who you need to hire and really know and be sure that you're hiring the right person, I don't think you can do it without a recruiter, be that internal or external, because they should be guiding you and formulating your thinking into actually, this is who I need to hire. Not, oh, Neil just resigned. Oh my gosh, let's get another Neil. It's like, well, hang on, Neil grew over the 3 years he worked for us. What else did he gain? And it's like, so who else do we need now? And that bit is what I'm trying to fix because I just don't think the beginning of the process has enough thought. And so that's where it came from.
And that's the mission, right? You're trying to get this into the hands of managers, leaders to make sure they understand the value of recruitment.
Yeah, and also the knock-on impact. So if they go out to market not really knowing who they want to recruit and they fumble through the process, there are human beings in that process that are being treated badly. So, that candidate experience that most managers and leaders don't even know what that is. It's buzzword bingo. But that's a human being being treated badly who will then not buy your products and services, not recommend your company, and potentially have their mental health impacted. So there's that side. But there's also the self-sabotage. Company leaders and managers are making the process so much harder for themselves. It isn't actually that difficult. It just involves thought and partnership and collaboration at the beginning. And some actually really clear communication. And it's just, if they put more thought at the beginning, whereas I think what happens is there's something like 80% of UK managers are accidental managers. There was that stat that came out recently. Can't remember.
Yeah. So accidental manager being, you're in a team of 6, you're seen as being really good at doing that job, and therefore you get promoted to be the team leader. The whole Peter principle, right? You get promoted to that point of incompetence.
And that exactly, because they're not supported. So if you've got managers who are accidental leaders of teams, they don't know what they're doing potentially, and then they're having to hire, then they really don't know what they're doing. But everybody thinks they can recruit because they think that these CVs and resumes just float down from the sky. So I want to set them up. I want to arm them. I just want them to read it and just get an understanding. For a start, it'll make their own hiring easier outright. Even if they choose to go, like, we're going to really try and fully AI, like, good luck with that. But because nobody's spoken to the job seekers to see what they want. But, at least they'll be able to say, hey, this is who I want to hire. I know how to articulate that. I know how to create that into a job description. And also I know how to make sure that I've considered all the points I need to when I'm interviewing. I don't teach them how to interview. There's enough books for that. But just things like turning up, being respectful, having your camera on if it's on video, things like that.
So I imagine in writing this book and the last book, because I know you've worked with all sorts of collaborators and experts across the industry.
Yeah.
Give us a flavor of some of the sort of horror stories you've heard recently of what is happening, particularly post pandemic, stagflation, recession in the economy. What's happening? What do you see and what worries you?
I mean, what worries me the most is the companies that are leaving the really amazing talent acquisition leaders. So they're super experienced, so therefore not cheap. So they've got, they expect a respectable basic salary.
Yeah.
They're not being hired. And I'm seeing a lot of companies trying to cost cut and hire someone into a global head of or global VP role with maybe 5 years of experience and's never run a team. It's like, oh, well, we'll give them that role. It's like, hang on a minute. Because they can't protect the team. The team then gets overloaded with requirements potentially. So they're working on too many roles. So they can't deliver a good candidate experience. They can't vouch for themselves either because they're so busy firefighting that they can't show what an incredibly proactive and professional function it can be and the difference it can make to the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so I see that. Sorry.
No. Okay. I was just going to say on that point, and I hear regularly that recruitment and talent acquisition has a perception problem, and you've talked about seen as an overhead, seen as tactical, reactive, and that sounds like what you're describing there is potentially going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, because they're underfunding them. So they kind of go, oh, let's cut the cost. They just, I mean, if you look at the top priorities for CEOs in 2024, it is cut costs and implement AI.
Yeah,
and do it quickly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, oh, hang on, I can get rid of Katrina. I'll put in AI and so they and you're like, no, hang on. Have you ever tried to recruit? Human beings are weird. They're quirky. They have thoughts, feelings, and emotions. This is their life and livelihood. They won't just interact with a robot for the career.
Yeah.
And when you think about, there are still cashiers in the supermarket. There are still cashiers in the bank or tellers in the bank. For mundane transactions, why does anybody think you can fully automate the hiring of people? But they're just so focused on cutting the cost. And I'm like, oh, but that doesn't allow talent acquisition to be able to go, do you know what? I hired Neil for you. Have you seen what he's done at this company? Have you seen the bottom line improvements or the sales that he's done? Or they don't get to vouch for themselves because they're potentially firefighting. They're just so,
So how do you think we get out of this cycle, right? How does a talent acquisition leader get their story across? Buy the book.
Buy the book. Yeah,
I've got it here.
I know. It's out. It's definitely out. You can definitely get it. It's published in the UK and the US now. It's so exciting. How do they get out of it? I mean, genuinely, I would love to see every CEO, every leader read this. It won't take them long. It's only 53,000 words, and beautifully, it's in big font, which is quite lovely. And I am pressuring to do the audio book because I know there's a lot of people that want that. But in the interim, read it yourself. But just try and put yourselves in the shoes of the person that recruits the people for your company, because I just think if you spent some time with them really understanding what it takes, I think there's also a really strange perception that it's like a company's market again.
Yeah.
Okay, there are more people out of work than there have been. However, there's still an internet out there with 5 billion people on it.
Yeah.
And that means that there are lots of jobs visible, which means they don't have to choose you. Even in the direst of circumstances, they would probably rather go and drive for Uber or, Uber Eats or do delivery or whatever than work for you if you're going to treat them badly. But there's still a bit of an arrogance there as well. And I think really, I've got a whole chapter about isms and phobias and not how to fix it, but what happens when you act that way, when you have poor behavior as a manager, and how it ends up on the internet. And I think just having that awareness might start for them to realize. But I think I've tried to make the case that they're not a cost center as well.
Yeah. You mentioned isms there, and that was something that struck me from the book. I really liked that chapter. Expand for us a little bit on what you see as the cost of these isms. What are the problems that we're seeing?
Companies then can't hire. They don't realize that. There's a few examples in there, like a manager being racist. And over on Blind App, he said what company that he's been recruiting or going through the hiring process at.
Yeah.
And an engineer at that company went, "Oh, I know who you're talking about. Oh, for sure. You totally went through that experience." And you're like, I'm reading this going, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's just because it could just be casual. You mightn't even have the awareness that you're doing it. So sometimes it's not intentional. The examples I've put in there are quite intentional.
Yeah. So the isms, racism, sexism, ageism.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Is that what you meant? Yes.
Yeah.
All of the, racism, sexism. I've done examples of like mansplaining, but I've also done the Queen Bee syndrome because women can undermine women as well. So I've been tried to be as non-biased as I can. I say as a white woman writing this book. But yeah, so all of those, and then any phobias, so transphobia and things like that.
Yeah. What's your
how it ends up online? I think that's the problem. You have to, because a lot of managers that perhaps are that bit older or they haven't been through the hiring process in a long time, and they just don't realize how chatty people are online about the hiring process.
Yeah. And just sort of expanding that a bit more, is there like a woke, anti-woke reaction? We hear about that in the media where companies are perhaps letting go of DEI leaders, perhaps, reducing spending on DEI initiatives. What's your take on what's happening and why?
Naivety. They think it's their market. I mean, it's not my area of expertise for sure. And the way I wrote that chapter was to refer people to other experts. I really wrote it with, here's what happens. They're online, you can't hire because people see this and go, I'm going to work at that company. So I think it's this, it's very naive of them to just not realize how comfortable people are to write their experiences online.
Yeah.
I mean, they will write Glassdoor interview reviews, they'll write Indeed reviews, and then they're over on Recruiting Hell on Reddit, they're over on Blind App. They are just sharing their experiences. And that stops companies from hiring.
Yeah.
So it's short-sighted to kind of knee-jerk reaction. But again, it's coming back to cost cutting all the time. We seem to have just got so into this, it's all about the bottom line and profit making, and we've kind of forgotten really what companies could be about. I mean, you see these companies that absolutely thrive when they're so people-centered and they are completely diverse and they're much more productive that way.
Yeah.
But sometimes leaders don't see that.
Katrina, if I can just look backwards a little bit to your last book, which was about being a survival guide for recruiters. I wonder if you've sort of had the pleasure of getting some feedback from people who've read that book, maybe some success stories.
Yeah.
What's that been like?
I think a lot of talent acquisition, and they feel like the vendors are very loud with their, like, we can replace you, and they're screaming it and getting these sales and tech. They feel like they're fighting technology. So sometimes it can just be, I'll get feedback of, gosh, you've just like reinvigorated me. You've given me back that sense of love I have for the job, because what we do is life-changing. We get to bring people into companies and watch them thrive. And it's sort of, I've had a lot of messages of, you've reinvigorated me, or you've reinforced to me that actually human first. I'm not anti the human experience to be supported by the right technology. So it's not like, can we use it in the right place? Not as in like a roadblock. So there's a lot of that. And also just I get a lot of messages of, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I wasn't taught that. Thank you for sharing with me how I can create a better experience. And actually, it's not that difficult. I think we have a generation that's grown up with technology in their hands, and they just probably don't understand as much as, say, I do as a Gen X, the importance of closure or the importance of a thank you and a please and a, just, so it's just sometimes just giving them something. And also because they can keep it on their desk and they can keep picking it up and referring back to it. It's very gritty. So that's a sort of, it is quite mind-blowing because the messages come in from around the world all unexpectedly, and I'm just like, wow. I was talking to Mireille Lee, who's at Test Gorilla, and she said the way she answered questions and was explaining how, she partners with her managers and all this kind of stuff. And then she said later, I read your book. And it was like, oh, that's so cool, because you've basically just played out everything I've talked about. So, yeah.
And how, in terms of then sort of taking that into writing the new book, Reboot Hiring, what did you learn during that process that perhaps you didn't know about recruitment the first time, or you didn't know about writing a book the first time? What was different second time around?
What was different was the confidence. So when I wrote the Robot Proof Recruiter, I was actually asked by Kogan Page, would I like to write a book? Thanks to Perry Timms. I have to give him credit. And I found it was, I felt so vulnerable. I'd just written out my opinion for the world to critique. They could literally pick up and go, oh my God, can you believe she said that? And it was, I remember sending it in and crying for an hour when I knew it was done. And I could not stop crying because I felt so vulnerable and so, oh my God, what did they hate? It's going on. And everyone loved it. And I had amazing feedback on it. And hence there is the second edition. So when I wrote Reboot Hiring, because I felt really confident and I felt much more like, right, this is what you need to hear. I'm sick of this. I've had enough, because it's 5 years later and I've had so much positive feedback on my writing and on my opinion, and just grown stronger and also more frustrated because I just see it as self-sabotage. I don't understand why managers don't partner with their recruiters. I don't get it. It's just silly. It's just, I was going to swear then. I managed not to.
That's fine. We're not going out on the BBC just yet, so I think we're all right.
Yes.
So, and I guess the flip side of that, was there anything where you look back and think, actually, I got that wrong, or my opinion's changed, or somebody's come to you and said, nah, Katrina, you missed that. Actually, this is what's happening.
Do you know, I've already had an example that I wish I'd got into Reboot Hiring. Just somebody sent me that it was a post. So we've just had World Suicide Day, or Suicide Awareness Day. And it was the fact that this gentleman was made redundant in March 2020. And after 6 months of nobody getting back to him, he took his life. Because unfortunately, people do kind of put their self-worth with their job. Unfortunately, they kind of put the two together. So when they then don't hear back from recruiters, which is on the recruiters and on the managers, to be fair, it doesn't help that they've tied the two together. But of course, it was also a really horrid time, as you remember. But I think that just that, so I missed out on that. Really, I do talk about mental health. I talk about the impact of redundancy on people's lives up to 10 years after they were made redundant. So can we stop the layoffs and the overhiring and the layoffs? But I just wish I had that example in there, because I just think we really must. And the only way that talent acquisition can get back to everybody is if they're given the tools, the right tools, and they're funded correctly and they're staffed correctly, so that they can actually get back to every applicant. Because it involves some time, not a huge amount of time, but some time. And then they need good feedback from their managers. So it's but at the end, there's these poor people in the hiring process. And really, that's probably why I wrote both books, is for the people in the hiring process.
Point there about, somebody finds the right job, it's life-changing, potentially, it gives them physical health, mental health, the wealth of the family improves, their engagement with life improves. And absolutely the opposite is also true, in that so many people's happiness is tied to their employment status. It's why
you have a responsibility as a company leader to remember that. They're not your family. That's like really toxic in itself, but that this job is part of their identity. And it depends what country you're in as well, because it can be more so depending on the culture of the country as well.
Yeah. I wonder, just thinking about that, we at TribePad, we ran our end ghosting research, for exactly that reason of trying to educate leaders in particular about the damage being done.
Confident. I quote that quite a lot in here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Do you see, you mentioned sort of the different culture across different countries there. Do you sense that there are some countries who are better at delivering that candidate experience, are perhaps more empathetic, or is that just a broad brush, like,
Don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Don't know. I think it's like almost just dropped off the radar at the current point. I don't know how you're experiencing it, but I just feel like for TA, I mean, just they're just up against it. Which is why I felt like I needed to write a book for the other side. But yes, I definitely quote the stat as 87% of applicants end up down or depressed. I'm sure that's the stat.
Yeah.
It is as high as that.
Yeah.
And interesting, in the second edition of the Robot Proof Recruiter, I talk about a spreadsheet I saw from a job seeker, and she's put all of the roles she applied for, and she's written ghosted when she didn't hear back.
Yeah.
Now, to an in-house recruiter, they often think it's just the interviewees think they're ghosted when they don't hear back, but actually to an applicant, or to a job seeker, it's the application.
Yeah.
So I do talk about that. I think going back to the culture piece, where I see it really challenging is, for example, when I was working with a team in India, and if you've got a male Indian hiring manager with a big title and there's a female, less experienced recruiter, there's already a power imbalance, and that's not going to help with feedback, because they're not going to communicate very well. There can be that kind of problem, and I've seen cross cultures with that as well, which make it harder. But it is just about communication and collaboration, really.
Yeah. Interesting. Candidate experience more widely, that's a subject you touch on in quite a bit of detail in the new book. What would be your top one or two things that you think TA leaders are getting wrong, that they need to change in that area of candidate experience?
Do you know what? I don't want to put it on the TA leaders. I actually want to put it on the managers.
Yeah.
Because if they stopped treating it as a cost center and an admin function, then again, TA would have the bandwidth, the money, the time to deliver a great experience.
Yeah.
But the other place I see it is, and still with the company leaders, I give an example in there where talent acquisition isn't brought into the conversation when technology is purchased for them. Now, if the CFO was having technology purchased for the finance department, you bet he's going to have a say in it. But for some reason, the people that recruit the people who use the technology day in, day out, sometimes are left out of this conversation.
Yeah.
And what happened in this particular example was, we were doing this amazing piece of work. It was all about, let's make sure this is from the TA team, right? Let's make sure the candidate experience is top notch. This is what we're going to do. And I've come in with Sue Ingram and we're delivering this work. And then they rolled out a HRIS add-on ATS, which unfortunately, this specific one was not fit for purpose, which meant there was one set of knockout questions for the entire world, not per job, just for they might have fixed that by now, but initially it was going to mean, instead of them getting, say, 600 applications for one role, they'll probably get 1,800. And you're kind of going, and because of the particular sector they're in, they have to get back to everybody.
Right.
That happened because TA was left out of the conversation.
Yeah.
It will have happened over in another part. And that goes back to this perception problem, and it's like, is it chicken and the egg? Because it's like TA is doing all it can, but if they're not getting the respect, and then just no one's listening in leadership.
Yeah, it strikes me as my early career was spent in marketing in a couple of different technology organizations, and I can think of two organizations in particular where marketing was really respected, understood, valued. It was a very commercial organization. It was very money focused. Creativity was superb, of course.
Yeah.
But they had a seat and a voice in the boardroom.
Yes.
I can then think of a couple of other organizations where I've been at, where marketing were the crayons and beanbags guys. It's like, make me a leaflet, write me a line of copy, but actually I don't want your opinion about anything strategic because you're a cost center. I won't name any of those organizations.
No, no.
The first couple
Don't look at Neil's profile.
don't look at the mugs on the window. I take a mug from everywhere I work. But the first two are huge household names with amazing brands who you see on TV all the time. And the second two are companies you've never heard of.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't have marketing. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, and that would be the same with employer branding as well. They also keep getting turfed out. And it's like, oh dear. I understand that there are times when companies aren't hiring, but actually that's when the internal team can be doing research, building the talent pool, streamlining processes, upgrading technology, like doing so much stuff. So when you are hiring, they're ready to go. And it's even better because you're going out to market. There's still an awareness all the time that you are a company that you do exist and that actually you will be hiring again at some point, rather than fire them and then you're starting from cold all the time.
Yeah.
But that goes back. It's the same like crayons and beanbags. That's all you people do, isn't it? Because they won't, for some reason, spend the time to find out what is it you do all day.
Yeah.
And ironically, sometimes I'm saying to talent acquisition, look, if you're recruiting this person, go and talk to the people in your company and ask, what does that mean? What, like this Java thing, what is that? Like, what do you do with it? Go and ask your developers. They'll explain to you and then you can recruit better. So it's like the flip. Go and talk to the team.
Yeah. That perception, that perception thing, as you said, it sort of cuts both ways, doesn't it? If you, in marketing, if you spend your whole time asking people about their opinion on a particular shade of blue, they're probably not going to be that impressed with you. I imagine in TA, if you're having a conversation about long-term planning and candidate experience and how we're delivering profit to the bottom line, that's a higher quality conversation than I'm too busy screening these people and have these many people not turn up for interview, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because then you can also ask or have the confidence to ask some of those more challenging questions as well. So I will say it again. I mean, going back to if you're going to put in weak leaders in the team's not going to feel confident enough to be able to say, so Neil, with this person we're hiring, is there a project reliant on that? What happens if we don't hire them? For some reason, that question totally scares recruiters. And I'm like, I think it's a really important question. What's the cost to the bottom line while this role's open? Are you going to need more like this? Shall I identify some more while I'm looking? And then you sound strategic. You get the manager will be going, oh, what is the cost if I don't fill this role? I didn't think of that. Well, there is a cost if you don't fill this role.
Yeah.
And that's the same with these ridiculous interview processes. If they start going, they want 4, 5, 6 rounds, you can start calculating it out on the salaries of those people and go, that's like 10 grand a round. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So, but it's chicken and the egg again.
Yeah. And this perception of TA within the organization, in the book, you call that one of the elephants in the room. What are the other sort of important elephants in the room that you think we should be talking about and shining a torch on?
I wrote this months ago. What else did I talk about?
Testing you on chapter 5 or whatever it is.
Was it chapter 5? I don't know. I can't remember. Now I am absolutely flicking through my book going, what else did I talk about? Oh, I talked about the power sitting with the employees and candidates. Page 63, everybody.
Yeah, there we go.
This is a read along.
I'm just checking.
Yeah, no, that the power sits with employees and candidates as well. Like that's the other thing that actually it's really quite valid at the moment. So I know a head of talent acquisition who's been hired on about half her normal salary, and believe me, she's going to be out the door in a shot.
Yeah.
The second the right role comes along, she'll be gone. That means she's only got one foot in the company. She'll be pretending that they're both in there. She's halfway out the door already. So there's like the false economy of that because of the internet, the 5 billion people playing around on the internet all chit-chatting. The fact I haven't had to have proper employment for 15 years because of the internet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, things like that. I talk about the cost center. I've got that. And then it's things like, really with that. So when TA comes in and it does a huge transformation project and it can save the company millions of pounds, there's sort of that look on the cutting the agency spend and retention. For some reason, companies don't link the two. That retention and failed hiring is unbelievably costly. And most people decide in the first week if they're staying or going.
Yeah.
But there's some stats in here somewhere about the fact that a lot of managers lie during the interview. So somebody starts, they realize in the first few weeks that they've been lied to, and they're already like, okay, I'm ready to leave again.
Yeah. This wasn't what I was sold.
No. But I give them great questions, which I crowdsourced, because there's 60 voices in here at least, that give them great questions to be able to articulate the truth. So Debbie Easterday shared a great question, which is, if somebody you loved was coming to work at this organization, what would you warn them about?
Oh, nice.
I
Yeah.
know. And so it's like, be honest. So there's all that sort of stuff. Oh, and then, yeah, be wary of snake oil, just the concern about technology, the wrong technology, all that sort of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't, what did you say? I don't pull any punches. It's,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
very
on
direct.
on
It's
on
time
on that
saving.
subject, you just mentioned sort of, you know, technology and AI we touched on before.
Yeah.
What do you think tech vendors should be doing differently? Because you know, everything's a combination of, you know, people, process, and technology. Tech isn't a magic bullet on its own, but is often sold as such. So what would your advice be? You know, just
Okay.
asking for a friend.
Yeah. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, for a start, I always, and I've said this in both books, you know, don't buy HR technology unless recruiters have input into it. So either they're an advisor or is created by recruiters. Not, oh, a developer had a bad day one day getting hired, so he created a tool that was, it's like, so, you know, sort of that sort of thing. Discussing, I want to see more clarity on the algorithms.
Yeah.
So if they're being used for parsing and screening, which concerns me because managers can't articulate who they need to hire and people can't write their CVs. So it's like, okay, messy, hence recruiters. But, you know, I want to understand more about the algorithm. I'd love to see more inquiry into that. So I'd love to see the HR tech vendors being a lot more open about how they try and reduce the bias.
Yeah.
You know, generative AI is you ask, show me a CEO, and it's going to show you white men.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, really think about it. So there's that side. And then it's interesting because I was having this chat with Adam Gordon earlier, who you also know.
Yeah.
The whole, if you're going to offer yourself as a self-service provider, like you're not going to need TA. We're going to do it all for you. That's with that kind of provider. Then you need to be training the managers to recruit.
Yeah.
And again, 80% of them are accidental managers. So, you know, please give them all my book or call me in. Hi, happy to help them with that. But it's just like, you can't do half the process, because I think what will happen is the company will purchase that technology, turf out TA, and then realize it is a monumental, can I say shit show? Shit show.
Definitely.
And then they'll go agency. So that'll be an increased cost to then end up hiring TA back. But by then we'll have lost some brilliant players out of the industry. So it's like, you need to know, you can't use AI to recruit without talent acquisition unless you know how to recruit.
Yeah.
And that's really not what your job is. Your job is whatever your job is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a manager, I mean, I don't know, I just think of perhaps a store manager in some high street somewhere. You know, you've got staffing, you've got stock, you've got the presentation of the store, you've got security, you've got, you know, recruitment is probably 1% of 1% of what's going on in your head right now.
Exactly.
So yeah, they need that help and assistance and training, and you know,
it's a full-time job for other people. But again, I mean, chicken and the egg. You know, I don't know why I've said that so many times in this podcast, but it's what it's feeling like. It's like,
so
one's got a perception problem, the other one won't give them any time to change that.
So in speaking with, you know, the collaborators you've had on the new book, did you come across, you know, particular stories, whether it was, you know, individual leaders or organizations who you think are getting it right, who are making some really good strides? Long pause.
Well, yeah, because more I was pulling in their disaster stories to say we don't need to be doing this. So it was sort of almost the opposite. But no, there's a brilliant example in there from Heidi Vashini, who was talking about using a tool like Test Gorilla, for example, which would do a hard skills test, but it was where it was placed in the process that really saved the company time and hassle. So there's a few examples like that in there, but I mean, God, is anybody getting it right? I mean, 2020s, what can we say? Roller coaster. I would probably, we were starting to get it right. And then the pandemic hit. That, you know, candidate experience was really super focused But I mean, of course, there are examples of companies that are getting it right. But
Yeah.
can I name one off the top of my head? No.
No, and I mean, look, there's all kinds of
Oh, good question.
industry awards, isn't there, where we see actually lots of great examples of people delivering these initiatives and some fantastic stories of success. So clearly there is best practice out there, and there is the opportunity to learn and improve.
And I guarantee if you look behind it, it will be, so people like Amy Miller, who's in Amazon, she does the satellite stuff.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name of her project. I actually can't pronounce it. Kuiper. Anyway, she has unbelievable relationships with her managers. Now, it helps that she's hired most of them, but they partner with her.
Yeah.
So behind every success story will be this really close partnership that they have and that they collaborate well. You want to get to the point where, like, we're working so well together that I just go, can you just interview this person? And you just trust me and interview them. You don't even look at their resume. You're just like, Katrina knows what I need, understands, I've articulated it well, and we're in close partnership and I trust her. I'm going to just talk to this person. And that's where really those examples come from. Okay. They're really more individuals than entire companies, in my experience.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? I mean, a company sort of doesn't exist. It's an amalgam of the people and the processes.
Are you sure? Because if you ask the CFO, they'd just say it's a spreadsheet.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking there about those, particular individuals who are doing really well, do you see like a pattern of a skill set that makes for a really successful TA leader? And if so, what would those skills be? If I was, starting out in TA, what would you be telling me to prioritize in my skills acquisition?
Curiosity. There is an extraordinary lack of curiosity in recruiters, which is weird because they ask questions all day. So they're super curious, really amazing listeners. So that's where technology is great. Use the tool to record the notes like we're doing now and ask questions and really listen and then ask follow-up questions. But also the confidence to set a boundary and be able to push back and say, no, Neil, you're being unrealistic. Or no, you can't treat a candidate like this because the impact to the bottom line is this. So they can also talk business speak.
Yeah.
And I think incredible resilience. You have to have resilience because we spend the majority of our day rejecting people out of the hiring process.
Yeah.
I think they sometimes call it dispositioning because apparently that sounds nicer. But we spend most of our time knocking people back.
Well, a dispositioning, I don't like that. I hope that doesn't take off.
No, but well, I think it's the American word for it, but that is the job. You get 100 applicants, there's one role, you're going to knock back 99 people. And that's tough. And if you're going to do it to make sure that their mental health is okay, because you're giving them that closure, as we know from your report, it's so important. You have to have that resilience to be able to go, actually, I'm doing them a service by letting them know that there are no. So those are the kind of skills. And I think just like a bit like a dog with a bone, like I will not be disrespected by my manager. I won't allow that person to not communicate and collaborate with me on this role. I am here to take recruitment off their plate. I'm here to help them. And I'm not here to waste the company's time, money, and and energy. My hustle. It's like if I often, well, actually, it's only lately I've sort of thought to say to recruiters, think of it that way. I'm not here to save you time, money, and hustle, manager. I'm here to save the company's time and money. So stop messing me around. You're a colleague. Communicate clearly with me.
Yeah.
So that's lacking a bit, unfortunately. So,
as well as an author and a speaker, you I know spend a lot of time mentoring different individuals. What are the sort of challenges and things that you come across that you feel you can really help with?
Those that I just mentioned, a lot of those skills, but periodically, like things like imposter syndrome, which I actually don't believe in, where it could be a situation where the manager is asking for a ridiculous list of must-have skills, for example, and then they go off on a unicorn hunt and then end up doubting their own ability to recruit because this person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's like learning how to communicate back, set those boundaries, and have a realistic expectation of who they're going to go and look for so that they don't have their own mental health impacted. So a lot of conversations around that. It's certainly not around, how do I find somebody? It's much more around the human side. Like, how can I engage better? How can I stand up for myself better? How can I build my self-worth up? And I bring in really 12 years of healing my childhood trauma. I've got this kit bag of tools from that I just bring in and use when I'm mentoring.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it to be so much on that, but it is.
And
I just think that they're burning out in this market, which is just the worst.
do you see that on the increase then, this risk of recruiter burnout and people leaving the industry? Yeah.
It's extremely high, and in HR, I bet it's really high in marketing as well. And interestingly, it's a slight deviation on topic, but you'll get why I'm saying it. The Surgeon General in the US has just said that parental stress is of such a level that it's a health concern, like completely, like put it on the radar.
Yeah.
And so much of that is due to job insecurity and being overloaded at work. Yeah. So people are concerned that their job's not secure, that they won't be able to pay their bills, and then they end up super stressed, which means their kids are suffering. And it's like, there goes another generation of trauma. So it's quite concerning.
Yeah.
And I do think that I did a survey on a recent talk I did, and I think it was half had been let go in the 2020s, those that answered the poll. And there was 30% were saying that they didn't feel like they had job security. And then there was another high percentage of didn't feel like their leaders had their back.
Yeah.
And that's concerning.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're the people hiring the people for the company.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's insane.
Yeah.
They're feeling how can you do that if you feel scared that you're going to lose your job? And how can you do it well? Because you can't push back with your managers because you're scared you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
And then are you hiring people and really not sure they're going to have a job? You know, it's messy.
Yeah, that does sound very messy. I guess looking forward then, hopefully with a bit of optimism, you know, we have a new government in the UK. There's you know, potentially a new president coming in the States in the next few months.
Yes.
What's your take on where we're headed? You know,
it depends what happens in November, because I think what happens in November impacts the entire world, unfortunately. I do think sense will prevail, because it kind of prevailed here, to be fair. So my hope is things will start to stabilize. I think, oh bless, Labour here in the UK is pushing poo uphill, really. They're starting from such a tough place that it's really hard to say how they're going to get on with it, but I hope we give them the chance. But I think November is crucial.
Yeah.
Because there's one pair of fairly stable hands and there's one pair of not stable hands, and I'm not sure which one's going to get elected. Surprisingly, it's actually close.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky. I get to work with clients all around the world, so I'm less impacted by what's going on in the UK.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, for TA themselves, I don't think the economy is so much the problem with I think technology, companies looking to replace them with technology is much more threatening if they are currently perceived as an admin function or admin person, even if they haven't been able to blow their own trumpet.
Yeah.
I've kind of evaded your question because it's a big question, and
it is a big question.
Political leanings.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
go Harris.
I mean, I've often sort of assumed that you know, HR and recruitment is you know, broad brush strokes, people working you know, in a sort of more caring occupation on the scale of sort of less caring and more caring, and that therefore they would generally be more likely to be sort of left leaning. Weirdly, I saw some research last year where the most read publication in HR leaders, women in HR leaders, was the Daily Mail, which then made me think, oh, maybe all of my assumptions are wrong, and it's not left leaning. So I wonder if there's a sort of you know, business leaders being right leaning, recruitment HR being left leaning. Maybe there's some sort of philosophical clash there. Who knows?
Anybody reading the Daily Mail makes me feel a bit nauseous.
Yeah, well,
it just comes up such hatred. It's just that's really sad. But then if that is the case, that might explain some of the earlier issues with the DEI being downplayed and or DEIB really being downplayed.
Yeah,
that's quite worrying. I mean, it's funny because there's the other school of thought that HR shouldn't be people because they spend so much time policing. which I'm not in
Yeah.
that camp. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
I think you look after your people, and if your people have job satisfaction or purpose, they have purpose, then they'll be super happy and super productive. So
Yeah.
that's the way I lean. But yeah, that's because I get to work for myself and do what I love, and I just say no to anything I don't want to do, which is a lovely position to be in.
That does
Because
sound like
I want to create impact.
Yeah.
I want this recruiting malarkey to be better, so that the poor people going through the hiring process don't have a bad experience.
Yeah.
That then their mental health isn't impacted.
And that's the mission, isn't it? Right. That you know, that's certainly our goal, is making, you know, recruitment fairer, faster, and better, and, you know, positively impacting millions of people's lives. Sharing those success stories. So
I mean, when I think about the impact that Reboot hiring could have, you know, if every leader read this book, even just the CEO of every company read this book, there would be a shift. And that shift wouldn't just be to the managers themselves making their lives easier. The recruiters would have an easier time. The job seekers would, the employees would. You'd hire better people who'd stay. And then that trickles all the way through their families. And all just by taking some time at the beginning to really think about what you're doing and to communicate and collaborate. What I'm asking for is actually not hard. And it doesn't cost anything other than the investment of £15 to purchase my book on Amazon currently. You know, it's like, it's actually not expensive to do what I'm asking.
a bargain at half the price. So Katrina, thank you very much for speaking with me today. I really hope the book is a huge success, and I guess even more important than that, I hope the mission of getting managers to see the value in talent acquisition is a success, because, you know, I think there is literally societal benefits to be reaped from that.
There really are. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks to Katrina Collier for what was a really fascinating chat about what's wrong in talent acquisition and why it needs a reboot. You can see more episodes and subscribe to The View at tripad.com/The View. Please share this with a friend, and do visit Katrina Collier's website with a link where you can purchase her book. Thanks, and see you next time.